Ladies and gentlemen, wishing you a peaceful night full of rest and relaxation tonight. We journey far beyond the hum of streetlights and the soft shuffle of bedtime routines. Tonight we slip into the ancient land of Sumer, where the rivers whisper old names and the wind carries the scent of clay and cedar. Picture it now, low, mud-brick houses huddled close together under a velvet sky. The Euphrates gurgles softly nearby, the stars blink down on ziggurats, and everything feels oddly timeless. Even the air tastes ancient. You walk barefoot along the dusty path, the soles of your feet pressing softly into a road worn smooth by centuries of sandals. Lamps flicker behind reed-matted windows, casting amber silhouettes of quiet lives. Someone grinding grain, someone humming a hymn, someone scribbling a love poem into wet clay, and that someone is very nearly you. Except, tiny spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this place. Between the communal baths' red, muddy ditches, the unpredictable floods, the occasional nomadic invasion, and a medical toolkit that includes beer and sheep fat. Let's just say it's not quite spa weekend material. But even so, something in this ancient world feels inviting, a slow exhale from a civilization that invented not only writing, but bedtime stories about love, lust, longing, and the occasional, slightly passive-aggressive breakup. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm here every week whispering strange old truths into the dark. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Ur, the heart of Sumer, one of humanity's first cities. And honestly, not a bad place to spend a fictional evening. You pass vendors closing shop, stacking dates and barley into tidy piles. Somewhere, a lyre plays a tune so old it makes your bones ache. It's not modern romance, no roses, no emojis, but it's oddly comforting. You feel like love might just be waiting around the corner. You follow the scent of hot brick and lamp oil until you arrive at a small house nestled between a bakery and a shrine. This is where your character, our sleepy protagonist, lives. You're a scribe. That means you've got decent calluses, a quick wit, and a very personal relationship with mud. Your tools: a stylus carved from a date palm twig, a water pot, and a small tray of clay tablets, still soft to the touch. Inside, it's warm. The hearth crackles, and beside it, your tablet press glows faintly from a day's work. You set down your writing board and dip your fingers into a bowl of sesame oil. The smell soothes you, earthy, slightly sweet, a scent that says you've made it through another dusty day. You stretch, crack your knuckles, and begin to think of her, or him, or them, whoever the poem is for tonight. Because that's what you do, you write love songs. Not just for fun, but as a scribe for hire. Someone leaves a shekel and a name in your window basket, and by morning they get a poem they can present to their beloved, chiseled into a piece of future archaeology. It's a gig. And in Sumer, people take their love songs seriously. These aren't just rhymes. They're declarations, negotiations, invocations. Love, after all, isn't just emotion. It's an economy, a ritual, a spiritual calling. Writing about it is half priesthood, half gossip column. Your fingers hover over the clay. You chew a piece of dried fig, your tongue searching for metaphors. What smells like her? What animal moves like him? You're not writing for TikTok likes. You're encoding feelings into a slab of mud that might outlast your house, your street, even your kingdom. No pressure. Tonight, the request is from a merchant's son, smitten, apparently, with a brewer's apprentice who smells like honey and hops. He wants something respectful, but flirty. You sigh. You've written this kind before. You once rhymed fermented with consented, and the elders are still chuckling about it. You dip your stylus into the water, then press it against the clay in rhythmic strokes. Left to right, down, pause, wipe, repeat. Cuneiform is nothing if not meditative. Each wedge and line is a breath in the dust, a moment made solid. You imagine the apprentice reading these words aloud tomorrow, face flushed, heart thudding. Behind you, your neighbor's goat sneezes. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And this act of writing love into permanence is something Sumer gave the world. They didn't invent romance, but they gave it a form, a shape, a script. And though you don't know it yet, these love poems will one day be studied by scholars in fluorescent-lit rooms who'll argue for hours over whether my beloved is a date palm was literal or deeply metaphorical. Historians still argue whether these songs were meant to be sung spoken or simply felt through the fingers. You finish the poem. It's short, hopeful, with just enough spice. You sign it with the stylized wedge that marks your name, half a pseudonym, half a prayer that your words will outlast the paperless, breathless chaos of this world. You smooth the edges, press the seal, and set it on the windowsill to dry. Then you lie back on your sleeping mat and watch the firelight flicker on the ceiling. Somewhere out there, someone is whispering the words you just wrote. Someone is blushing. Someone is believing for a moment that love can be caught in language. And, as the night deepens around you, you smile. Another poem, another soft heart. Just another evening in Ur, where even the bricks hum with old poetry. You awaken to the soft groan of wood, your neighbor, rolling open a shutter, and the distant clatter of a donkey cart, nudging its way through the narrow alleyway. Morning in Ur isn't exactly a slow affair. The city wakes early and loudly. But before your mind reaches for breakfast, it reaches for your clay. The tablet from last night rests cool and dry on the sill, catching a glint of sunlight. Still intact, still legible, still carrying that small ember of affection that a merchant's son entrusted to you. It's a good start to the day. After a few chores and a rather disappointing bowl of barley porridge, the figs ran out yesterday, you trudge through the sleepy marketplace to the scribal quarter. The streets here are lined with low workshops, each one exhaling the faint, constant scent of damp earth and ink. You pass other scribes nodding politely, some sharpening styluses, others deep in arguments about verb tenses. At your own little stall, you begin shaping a fresh batch of clay tablets, your hands rhythmically patting and folding the material like dough. Clay is more than your medium. It's your canvas, your confidant, your slightly unreliable co-worker who cracks in the sun if you're not careful. You press the wet clay into a flat square and sit back. It's hard not to marvel this is what your civilization is made of. Not just bricks and irrigation canals, but these little slabs of memory. The Sumerians didn't just invent writing to count goats and record taxes, though yes, that was 90% of it. They used it to tell stories, and among those stories, nestled between hymns and hymnal complaints about grain prices, are lines of startling, beautiful tenderness. Lines like, "My beloved who makes sweet my loins, let me bathe in your fragrance." Not exactly Shakespeare, but not bad considering you're writing with a stick on mud. Cuneiform isn't just a script. It's a method of breathing life into silence. You press a stylus triangle shaped, often carved from reeds or palm twigs, into moist clay, forming a series of wedge impressions that somehow miraculously carry sound and meaning across time. No vowels, no punctuation, no helpful emojis. Just an intricate puzzle that your brain has learned to decode like a musician sight-reading music from a seashell. And it's not just for state affairs or temple records. Love found its way onto clay very early. Why? Because even in a world ruled by ziggurats and river floods, people wanted to flirt. People wanted to woo. And most of all, people wanted to be remembered. Love poetry wasn't just romantic, it was a tiny rebellion against impermanence. Of course, writing love songs in cuneiform comes with a few challenges. For one, there's no delete key. Once you press into the clay, that's it. Mess up the grammar, and you're the butt of jokes in the beer hall. Secondly, clay tablets are heavy. One short poem can weigh more than your dinner. Scribes everywhere develop excellent forearms. Finally, there's the issue of interpretation, because Sumerian words often hold multiple meanings. Your sweet nothings can quickly become not-so-sweet somethings. Take the Sumerian word kisikal, for example. It can mean maiden or haunted place. Context is everything. Still, the effort is worth it. In a culture where orality was once everything, the very act of writing is a bit magical. You are slowing time, pinning down something ephemeral. The sun rises, the river shifts, the gods argue among themselves, but your words will remain baked and tucked away in a temple archive, maybe even buried beneath a house foundation for luck. Historians still argue whether love tablets were meant for public recitation or private rituals. Many of them were found sealed in jars, hidden like treasure or shame. And it's not just nobles or scribes who engage in this tradition. Commoners, merchants, priestesses, even the odd soldier with more muscles than metaphors, all might compose or commission lines of affection. Literacy isn't widespread, but the desire to express longing is. Back at your work table, you've just smoothed a fresh slab when a familiar figure approaches. Robbie, an old brewer with arms like tree trunks and the grin of someone who's never lost a drinking contest, sets down a pouch of barley and says, "Write me something. Fierce." She's the loud one who sells copper pins near the shrine. I want her to know I'm serious. You nod. You've written for him before. He always pays in grain, and his poems are always vaguely terrifying. You start drafting. Your voice like thunder stirs the river's heart. I would wrestle Enlil for a glance from your eye. Not bad. Could use a metaphor about oxen. He likes those. You continue pressing symbols into the clay, letting the rhythm guide you. There's something almost sacred about this moment. The morning noises fade, the shouting vendors, the barking dogs, even the priest, loudly explaining goat entrails to a wide-eyed child. Here, it's just you and the clay. And maybe that's the secret in a world that's loud and fleeting. The Sumerians gave themselves a way to linger, a way to whisper across centuries, through taxes, treaties, and yes, through songs about buttermilk and hips like ripe dates. Your fingers ache, but you smile. Because even if no one remembers your name, someone somewhere someday will stumble upon this tablet, squint at its faded edges, and feel the echo of a heart long stilled. And for a moment the dust will hum again. The afternoon air hangs heavy with heat. Somewhere nearby, a pot cracks in the sun. You take a long sip from a jug of lukewarm beer, not your favorite refreshment, but when the water might carry more diseases than blessings, it's the safer gamble. You wipe the sweat from your brow with the edge of your robe and lean back against the wall of your stall, letting the shade work its slow magic. It's during these drowsy hours that your mind starts to wander beyond the baked walls of Ur, beyond the city gates, even beyond your own life. You find yourself thinking, not just about how you write, but why your people ever started writing love songs at all. Sure, the gods deserve hymns. Kings need propaganda. Temples must track barley down to the last grain. But love, that's soft, messy, wildly impractical. And yet, some of the earliest writing we've ever found is soaked in longing. You recall a line from a tablet found not far from here. Bridegroom, dear to my heart, goodly is your beauty, honey sweet. Not a ledger, not a war account, just a line from one person to another, hoping to freeze a moment in words before it slips away. Love for the Sumerians wasn't just an emotion, it was a link between the earthly and the divine. The myth of Inanna and Dumuzi, the goddess of love and the shepherd god, is perhaps the most famous Sumerian love story of all. It's not a fairy tale. It's passionate, chaotic, full of seduction, grief, resurrection, and seasonal cycles that mirror real life and farming. In the myth, Inanna visits Dumuzi in the fields and lavishes him with poetic praise. Their encounter is, shall we say, agriculturally symbolic. Let's just say there are many references to cream plowing and ripe fields. Historians still argue whether these myths were acted out in literal sacred unions rituals, where a priestess representing Inanna and a king or priest stood in for Dumuzi. Was it symbolic theater, or was it, well, more hands-on? The clay doesn't exactly come with stage directions. What we do know is that the line between love, sex, and spirituality was often blurred in Sumer. To write a love song was to court not just a person, but the attention of the gods. It was a little performance between worlds. You, the humble scribe, become a vessel for something both absurdly human and faintly divine. You shift your weight and notice the tablet you pressed earlier, the one for Rabbi. It's drying unevenly. You reach over, gently tilt it. Clay, like love, needs the right conditions, too dry, and it cracks. Too wet, and it never sets. A soft knock draws your attention. It's Ninsaba, the temple librarian, a woman with the observational skills of a hawk and the patience of a desert tortoise. She's carrying a wrapped bundle, old tablets from the temple vault, she says, many still untranslated. You've got a steady hand, she mutters. See if you can copy this one. Looks like a song. You unwrap the bundle on your lap, careful not to smudge the dust that's clung to it for centuries. Your fingers trace the ancient impressions. Deeper than most writing, someone pressed these symbols hard, like they meant them. It's not a business account. It's not a harvest list. It's a love poem. Your charm is sweet like fine beer. Your speech is smooth like polished lapis. You smile. It's clumsy, sweet, maybe even a little drunk. But it's real. Reading the lines, you imagine the writer, a young woman perhaps in the temple of Inanna, heart fluttering as she writes down the shape of her feelings. Maybe she wrote it for a priest, maybe for a trader passing through. Or maybe she just wanted the goddess herself to know her longing. And maybe she hoped someone would find it someday. That someone is you. You begin copying it gently, stroke by stroke. Your stylus finds the rhythm naturally. This was meant to be sung. You can almost hear the soft hum in the background. Feel the beat of feet on packed earth as someone danced to this under a full moon. You're not just transcribing, you're reviving, breathing into something long asleep. It's strange, isn't it? In a culture where most people couldn't write the act of committing love to clay had weight. Each word was a risk, a decision. You don't casually say I love you when doing so takes an hour and might be preserved longer than your bones. And the metaphors, oh the metaphors. Sumerian love poetry is brimming with comparisons to honey beer, fruit, sheep rivers, and clouds. Today it might seem odd to tell someone they have the buttocks of a fine ox, but back then, that was the good stuff. Historians still argue whether such comparisons were considered sensual humorous or simply descriptive. Some suspect a mix of all three. You finish your copy and lay the new tablet beside the original. The sun has started to dip, casting golden slants across the walls. You hear the first notes of a lyre being plucked near by a sound that never quite fades in like a lullaby played on repeat by the city itself. As you pack up your tools, you feel a quiet satisfaction. Today, you didn't just write, you translated longing. You preserved a voice, and for a brief moment, you remembered that love like clay requires softness, pressure, and the courage to hold shape when the fire comes. The next morning arrives on the wings of pigeons, squabbling over a crust of bread just outside your door. You stretch, yawn, and feel that familiar pinch between your shoulders, the scribe's curse. Too many hours hunched over wet clay with your arms doing the slow, careful dance of the stylus. But there's no time to coddle muscles today. You've been summoned to the house of the high priestess. Not for punishment, thankfully, and not for another audit of temple grain rations either. You're needed for something more delicate. By the time you make your way to the grand columned entrance, the city is already in full hum. Bakers shouting pots, clanking livestock, honking indignantly at being led to market. The temple stands above it all, cool and quiet, a rare island of order in the delightful chaos of Ur. You're escorted to a shaded courtyard where a young acolyte, barefoot, solemn, and barely older than a loaf of sourdough, hands you a sealed tablet. The lady wishes a love song transcribed into the older dialect, he whispers, as though the gods themselves might overhear. You glance at the clay. The stylus marks are delicate, the kind that belong to someone raised on hymns, not harvest ledgers. It's a poem, elegant and yearning, addressed apparently to a warrior with thighs like cedar trunks. Charming. As you begin translating it into the older, more formal Sumerian script, a task that requires both skill and saint-like patience. Your thoughts drift once more to the strange social life of love poetry in your world. Because here's the thing, Sumerian love songs weren't just private flirtations. They were public performances. In fact, many were sung during festivals, especially the springtime ones that honored fertility, rebirth, and that famously frisky goddess Inanna. During Akitu, the New Year festival, entire city plazas filled with chanting, dancing, and poetic recitations. Think poetry slam meets religious rite, meets tipsy matchmaking fair. The lines from love poems weren't whispered behind curtains. They were belted out by trained singers, often priestesses, to honor the sacred union of God and goddess, and also to remind humans how to be properly enthusiastic about one another. And this wasn't just about abstract divinity. These performances reinforced the legitimacy of kings. The ruler of the city often played the role of Dumuzi, the shepherd god, and his ritual union with a priestess of Inanna symbolized cosmic harmony and agricultural blessing. If the crops failed, well, maybe he didn't recite his love poem with enough passion. Historians still argue whether these unions were symbolic dramatizations or literal sacred acts. The sources are tantalizingly vague, and some scholars seem far too enthusiastic about imagining the logistics. In any case, writing a love poem wasn't just a private pleasure. It was civic duty, religious ritual, and possibly state-sponsored theater. You pause your translation work and examine the stylus marks again. The writer used Imesal, a dialect associated with female speakers, and sacred music. It's softer, more poetic than the main dialect, and far harder to translate without sounding ridiculous. You reach for a second stylus, the fine one, and begin rewriting the lines into the older form, one careful wedge at a time. Each word feels like a thread tugged from another time. My lover fierce as the storm wind, your embrace scatters my doubts like dry chaff. The imagery isn't just romantic, it's elemental. In Sumer, emotions are tied to natural forces. Love can be a flood, a harvest, a scorching wind. You don't just fall for someone, you're seized, overwhelmed, plowed like the spring fields. Tenderness comes with thunder. Still there's sweetness, too. One well-known poem found in the archives of Nippur speaks of a lover who leaves her partner date cakes under a fig tree. Another describes a woman brushing oil into her beloved's beard so that he smells like the gardens of Dilmun. Sensuality wasn't shameful. It was part of sacred living. After all, the gods themselves were enthusiastic lovers. You can't help but chuckle at how little has changed. People still try to impress each other with food fragrance and flattering metaphors. Sure, nowadays there's a bit less lapis and incense involved, and a bit more garlic breath and awkward sandals, but the instinct remains. The acolyte returns eyeing your progress. You hold up the freshly pressed clay. This version, you say, uses the dialect of Uruk's older temple archives. She'll sound like she's been in love for centuries. He bows and scurries off with the tablet held, like it might hatch into a godling. You stand, stretch, and dust the clay crumbs from your lap. The temple breeze carries the distant notes of a harp. Someone somewhere is rehearsing for the next festival. And you realize something peculiar. In a society where power was often hoarded by kings and priests, love songs were democratic. They spoke in the voices of girls and goddesses, soldiers and shepherds. They crossed boundaries. They imagined feelings into permanence. They turned longing into public celebration. And for all the myths and metaphors, the core idea was simple: love makes you want to be remembered, even if that memory is written on a chunk of baked dirt. You leave the temple grounds with the odd comfort of knowing that while the rivers may change course and ziggurats crumble, the need to tell someone they smell like honey-soaked dates and deserve a poem that apparently survives. You're back in your own workroom now, the door cracked open just enough to catch a breeze, but not enough to let in any inquisitive cats. The sunlight strikes the shelves at just the right angle to illuminate your collection of styluses, some carved from date palm, others from bone, each with its own personality. It's the Sumerian version of a writer's drawer full of fancy pens. You're supposed to be organizing tax records today. Barley in beer, out repeat until your soul crumbles. But your thoughts keep drifting back to the clay tablet you copied this morning. The one about the warrior with thighs like cedar trunks. It wasn't just the metaphors that lingered. It was the emotion in them, the way each line trembled with sincerity and mild desperation. You glance toward a worn tablet on the back shelf, one you've never managed to throw out. It's cracked, uneven, and written in a handwriting that looks suspiciously like yours when you were younger and less concerned with symmetry. It's a love poem, one you wrote once. Sumerians didn't have privacy in the modern sense. Houses were open, shared. Temple libraries were public. Even when you wrote something for yourself, chances were high someone else would find it, then catalog it for the gods just in case. That means love songs weren't just declarations. They were also performances. And sometimes, little acts of courage. That leads you to ponder one of the most overlooked spaces in all of Sumerian society, the school. Known as the Aduba, literally the tablet house. It was where scribes were forged in the fires of repetition and bruised knuckles. You remember your own days in the tablet house. Your teacher had a forehead permanently furrowed like a plowed field, and a strict policy that poetry was only to be written after you'd mastered numbers lists and the entire king list backwards. Still, you and your fellow students found ways to sneak it in. On the back of inventory logs, you'd scribble couplets. When practicing wedge angles, you'd shape little hearts, though they looked more like fat fish hooks in clay. Historians still argue whether poetry was officially taught in the Aduba or whether it survived through informal channels passed along like a favored recipe or a whispered joke. What is clear is that by the time scribes left school, they not only knew how to calculate oxen rations and legal contracts, they could also pen a halfway decent love ode. You reach for a practice tablet, one of the reusable ones made from softer, moister clay. On it, you write an opening line, not for anyone in particular, just to see if the words still come. Like the moon at dusk, your face softens my fear of the night. Not bad, not great, but it feels good to write it down. The Sumerians believed that writing had its own kind of magic. Not in the wand-waving sense, but in the way that a name once pressed into clay became a kind of tether, a charm. To name a person, a feeling, or a desire was to call it into being. That's why love songs held power. Not because they were dramatic, but because they made the private permanent. And there's something else, they weren't always happy. You think of another poem from the archives less often copied, but haunting in its quiet sorrow. You have gone. My heart cracks like dry mud. My bed is large and full of wind. That's breakup poetry Sumer style. It's raw. It's quiet. It sounds like someone left not just a home, but a whole season behind. The Sumerians knew that love wasn't always celebratory. Sometimes it was elegy. Sometimes it was the sound of someone sweeping their threshold alone. Even so, they wrote it down. They believed in naming pain, recording it, letting others see that even in a world of strict hierarchies and ritual, the heart had its rebellions. Your thoughts are interrupted by your neighbor Gilalam sticking his head through your doorway. He's chewing on something green and questionable. You still working, he grunts, as if that's not a deeply ironic question to ask a man with clay under every fingernail. You nod, rewriting an old line. He raises an eyebrow. Another epic. Not this time, just a line about missing someone. Gilalum considers this, then shrugs. That's worse. At least epics pretend someone wins. He leaves mumbling something about borrowing your water jug again. You don't mind? He's not wrong. Back at your tablet, you lean closer. Add another line. Then another. Soon your hands are moving without thought. The room disappears. It's just you, the stylus, and the weight of feeling transcribed. You wonder how many scribes like you wrote these songs without ever sending them. How many lines were meant for someone who never heard them? How many poems sat in storage bins of ziggurat libraries waiting for eyes that never arrived? Maybe that's the point. Not every love poem has to be read. Some just have to be written. So you press each word gently, not because someone will find it, but because someone might. And because, as the Sumerians knew, putting love into form, any form, is a kind of sacred rebellion against forgetting. The sun droops lower over Ur, throwing amber light across the streets. You're walking now, slowly meandering with no urgent destination. It's a pleasant kind of purposelessness, the kind that lets thoughts unfurl like the river reed mats laid out to dry in front of homes. Your sandals scuff the dust and the smells of the city shift with every alley fish stew crushed mint, a passing whiff of hot bitumen. You pass a group of children jumping between the cracks in the bricks of the road, chanting something that sounds suspiciously like a nursery rhyme. If you pause to listen, you'd recognize the rhythm. It's the same cadence found in older poems, even the temple hymns. The earliest forms of Sumerian verse were built on repetition and pattern, turning language into something your ears could follow, even when your eyes could not. There's a reason for that, of course. Most people in your world can't read. Writing is elite, practical, professional, sacred. But the sound of language, that's for everyone. Which is why poetry was often sung aloud, passed from voice to voice like a cup of barley beer. You think of the old woman who lives 2 streets down. She can't sign her name, but she knows the verses of 10 different temple songs by heart. Every market day she hums one while she chooses her onions. A lullaby about Inanna's cloak. A chant to soothe nightmares. A verse about a boy who tried to woo a priestess with a melon. Historians still argue whether these oral poems preserved ancient hymns or were constantly being rewritten by everyday people. Probably both. Language like soup tends to evolve based on what's available in the kitchen. You take a shortcut through the merchant quarter where women are counting loaves and scribes are recording debts with the urgency of priests invoking fate. But it's the wall that catches your eye, a fresh smear of wet clay shaped into a makeshift tablet pressed directly onto the brick. Someone has carved a poem here. You passed my door and did not turn your face. The sun was less cruel than that. It's unsigned, brief, honest. You suspect it's new, fresh heartbreak still steaming. It's not temple poetry. It's street poetry. And it might just be your favorite thing you've seen all week. This kind of anonymous expression is more common than people realize. Sure, Sumeria had professional poets, the kind who wrote for temples, kings, or ritual events. But just as often, it was ordinary people scratching feelings into clay scraps or reciting verses to neighbors after too much beer. You remember not too long ago attending a modest wedding by the river. No priest, no official scribe. But the groom's cousin stood up with a smile like cracked pottery and delivered a poem that made half the crowd sniffle. You who stir my insides like tamarisk sap, may your love outlast the bricks of this house. Not canonical, not immortal, but real. You wonder now how many of these informal poems survived. Likely, not many. Clay breaks, scribbles fade, and official archives rarely preserve the voices of people with dusty fingernails. But every now and then, a miracle happens. Archaeologists digging near Lagash once found a tablet, not in a temple, not in a library, but wedged under a doorway stone. It was a personal love poem, carefully carved, possibly used as a talisman, or maybe just hidden where it wouldn't be taken. You are honey in my mouth, smoke in my eyes, noise in my heart. You smile remembering it. That line has stuck with you for years. It sounds more modern than it should. And maybe that's the point. Love poems in Sumeria weren't always composed in stiff, formal tones. Some were earthy. Some were funny. Some sounded like flirtation at a fish market. Sumerians believed that language could be a kind of architecture. Poets were builders. Words were bricks. But not all structures were temples. Some were just garden walls meant to be leaned on, lived around, maybe climbed over during moonlight trysts. You reach the edge of the city now where the buildings thin and the reeds begin. There's a slight mist rising off the marsh. Frogs chant lazy benedictions to the coming dusk. It's here in this hush that you find yourself reciting under your breath. A fragment, something old. I shall kiss you until your name is written in the stars' soft light. Did someone teach you that? Did you write it Or was it whispered by a lover to someone else long ago beneath this same lavender sky? It doesn't matter. In Sumer, love poems were always a bit like prayers meant to be spoken aloud, even if no one but the reeds heard you. You sit on a flat stone stylus in hand tablet in lap. The evening is cool now, and the clay is just soft enough to take your thoughts. And maybe this time you won't save it. Maybe you'll press it into a wall somewhere. Leave it for someone else to find. Because if love has a shape in your world, it's a wedge, a mark, a moment preserved by someone who didn't want to forget. It's a quiet evening now, the sounds of the city softening as the sun sinks into the west. You wander back toward home, the rhythm of the day slowing with the fading light. The path is familiar, worn smooth by countless steps, and your thoughts continue to turn over that poem you found on the wall. There's something comforting in it despite its sharpness, as though someone else's fleeting heartache can be part of your own quiet night. As you approach your home, the first stars are beginning to shimmer faintly overhead, one by one. They're not quite the bright jewels you see later in the night, but you know that by the time the moon rises, they will be scattered like grains of salt across a black velvet sky. You remember how the Sumerians viewed those stars less as points of distant fire and more as celestial neighbors. Their constellations were filled with meaning, some written in their very names: the bull of heaven, the scorpion man, the great lion. Each was not just a pattern in the sky, but a living, breathing story. And the gods they believed were as present in the stars as in the air they breathed. But there was another star you haven't thought about in a while, the morning star, or Inanna's star, the one that symbolizes love, beauty, and perhaps a bit of reckless ambition. It was said that when Inanna, the goddess of love and war, descended to the underworld, she did so in the full glow of her star, her light shining so brightly that it seemed to pierce the very fabric of the heavens. And when she returned, it was her love for the mortal shepherd, Dumuzi, that brought her back to the world of the living. This myth, like so many others, has layers. It's not just about the star, it's about love that moves through the heavens down to the earth and into the hearts of men and women. But most importantly, it's about longing. Sumerian love songs were filled with this yearning, the pull of something just out of reach. As you approach the front door, you catch the faintest scent of fresh bread drifting from the house next door. It's always a welcome scent, warm and comforting. You pause for a moment, letting the smell linger, then enter your own home, kicking off your sandals and settling into your favorite spot by the clay oven. The house is quiet now. The children are in bed, the evening chores completed. The light inside is soft, casting long shadows that stretch across the floor in the same lazy rhythm of the evening. And yet, despite the quiet, there's something stirring in the air. A kind of unspoken expectation, like the moment before a storm breaks. You don't know why you're suddenly thinking of the love songs again. Maybe it's because of the poem on the wall, or maybe it's because of the star, the morning star that hangs just out of reach in the sky. You remember how those ancient songs felt, how they shimmered with longing, with tenderness, with the kind of passion that burns without ever being seen. Sumerians knew that love wasn't always simple. It wasn't just a feeling that could be easily captured in a single glance or a kiss. Love, they believed, was a process, something that ebbed and flowed, like the river that cut through the city, something that could fill you up and leave you empty, something that could grow as quickly as it could wither. And yet, despite all the heartache, they wrote because in the end, love, no matter how fleeting, was worth the effort. To capture it in words, to preserve it in clay, was to make something of it, even if it was just a moment. Even if it was just for them. You think about this as you settle in for the night, the sounds of the city growing quieter with each passing minute. Your tablet is by your side, the stylus within reach, and the evening feels as full of possibility as the clay in your hands. Maybe tomorrow you'll write your own poem. You lean back, staring up at the ceiling, lost in thought. The world outside is quiet now, but the stars are still there. They're always there, waiting for someone to reach up and pull them down, to capture them in a verse or a song, to make them something real, something tangible. And somewhere in the stillness of the night, a scribe is writing, not for the gods, not for kings, but for love. Night falls fully now, the city of Ur, a mere silhouette against the starlit sky. The wind is a gentle whisper, carrying the faintest notes of distant laughter, the lingering scent of incense from a nearby temple, and the soft rustle of reeds by the river. You lie back in your bed, the warmth of the clay walls surrounding you, and for a moment you feel like you're part of the very fabric of this ancient world. But there's something else on your mind, a quiet question as subtle as the breeze. Why did the Sumerians write their love songs down? Why not just whisper them at a festival, or sing them under the moonlight, and let them fade with the night like every other fleeting emotion? The answer lies somewhere between art and practicality. Sumerian society was a world of permanent records. Everything was written down: taxes, laws, contracts, royal decrees, things that had to endure. So why not love? Historians still argue whether love songs in Sumer were truly meant for preservation, or whether they were a spontaneous overflow of the heart. Were they penned in the heat of passion later to be stored away and forgotten? Or were they deliberately crafted for the ages, their authors hoping their words would transcend time? Perhaps it was both. Maybe the Sumerians recognized that love was a kind of currency, something worth recording, keeping, and remembering, just like the land, the crops, or the king's decrees. They wrote love songs not to keep secrets, but to share something universal, a moment of connection, of desire, of sorrow. Your hand instinctively reaches for a nearby tablet. It's smooth, cool under your fingers, still soft enough to take a message, a whisper, a secret. You begin to etch a few words, not caring if they're perfect or not. There's a rawness to them, a simplicity, a truth. You who smile like the moon, your touch is a breeze I have always known. It feels right somehow. No grand declarations, no exaggerated metaphors, just words that for a moment hold meaning. But there's more. The Sumerians didn't just preserve their love songs in clay, they also performed them. Some were recited in temple rituals, others sung at festivals, and still more passed around from hand to hand like treasure hidden in the folds of a worn-out cloak. The ancient world was an oral one, where words were as much about sound as meaning. You think about the sound of those poems, how they would have filled the air. No one would have simply read them quietly. These were declarations meant to be spoken aloud. Perhaps it's in the voice where the magic of the poem truly lived. After all, language in the Sumerian view wasn't just something to be understood, it was something to be experienced. And when a love song was sung in a crowded marketplace or whispered beneath the stars, it wasn't just the words that mattered. It was the moment, the timing, the voice. A whisper might have been shared between lovers, or perhaps sung aloud at a festival with everyone listening. But the Sumerians knew that in both cases, the song lived on because it was shared. You lie back now, stretching out the tablet still in your hands, but the words have stopped flowing. For the first time in hours, there's stillness. You think about the connection between people in the ancient world, how even when privacy was scarce, intimacy wasn't. Love was something that everyone had access to. Whether written on a tablet or shared in a quiet corner of the market, It was an equalizing force. And now as the city sleeps around you, you imagine the Sumerians who lived, loved, and wrote long before you were born. What did they hope for when they pressed their words into clay? Did they wish for someone? Anyone to find their lines centuries later? Did they think their words would live beyond their lives? It's a question you'll never have an answer to, but in some ways, that's the beauty of it. The mystery of love songs, like the stars above, is that they continue to shine whether you're there to see them or not. They exist because they were written, sung, and shared. They exist because love, like language itself, is meant to transcend. The breeze picks up again, colder now, and you pull the blankets closer. You're already drifting, but there's one more thought that lingers before you sleep somewhere, perhaps just beyond your reach. Someone is writing. Someone is singing. Someone is loving. And their words, like the stars, will remain. The night is thick now, the sky like a vast curtain of velvet, and the stars seem to shimmer with the wisdom of centuries. Your eyelids grow heavy, but there's still a lingering thought like the taste of honey on your tongue. Why did the Sumerians choose clay? What was it about this humble material that made it so integral to their love songs and poems? You can almost feel the texture of the clay beneath your fingertips. It's rough at first, but once softened, it becomes like skin, something alive, something that can hold meaning, something that can keep secrets. The early Sumerians didn't have parchment, and they certainly didn't have ink as we know it. Instead, they used a simple reed stylus to carve their words into soft clay tablets, leaving behind marks that would harden with the heat of the sun, or, in the case of more official tablets, in the kiln. But those tablets weren't just functional. They were vessels for ideas, messages, not meant to fade, but to endure. And though love songs weren't official documents, they still carried weight. A poem etched into clay might last far longer than the fleeting emotions that inspired it. Perhaps that's what drew people to it. The idea that the words could transcend time, could be carried from one generation to the next like a precious heirloom. Historians debate whether the use of clay was purely practical or whether there was something more profound at play. Some argue that the Sumerians, living in such an ephemeral world, sought to preserve their emotions in the most lasting material they had. Others believe that the act of writing itself, transforming a fleeting moment into something permanent, was a form of control, a way to keep emotions from slipping through their fingers like sand. But in the case of love, it wasn't about control. Love, in all its forms, was a surrender, a letting go, a recognition that feelings were too big to fit into the confines of everyday life. Writing a love song in clay wasn't about containing those feelings. It was about sharing them, about making them something that could live beyond the person who created them. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the soft sounds of the night wash over you. The frogs still sing, the distant hum of the marketplace drifts like a ghost on the wind. The air feels cool now, a sign that the night is deepening. But before you fully let go, you find yourself thinking again of the love songs. The Sumerians weren't just writing for themselves. They were writing for the ones who came after them. They wanted their love to echo across time. Some of those songs were composed in the temples for sure, where the gods were invoked, and hymns of devotion filled the air. But the real magic happened on the streets, in the quiet moments between lovers, in the hidden corners of the city where poets worked in secret. Here, away from the watchful eyes of the scribes, love found its voice. And it wasn't just the noble or the powerful who wrote these songs. Every person had access to love and, by extension, to poetry. You think back to the poem you found earlier, the one etched into the wall. the one that seemed so desperate and so full of raw emotion. It wasn't written for glory or fame, it was written because it had to be. Because sometimes when love hits you, you have no choice but to capture it, to hold it in your hands, and make it real. Love songs were also a way for the Sumerians to wrestle with the divine. If you're honest, there's a part of you that still believes the gods are listening even now. The Sumerians wrote their love songs as if the gods were in the room, as if they were standing just behind the door, watching. And in a way, they were. After all, love, whether in the sacred temples or in the quiet homes of everyday people, was a divine act. It bridged the human and the divine. You pause, sitting up a little. Your mind, a whirl of images, the moonlight glinting off the river, the scent of wet clay, the faces of lovers who existed only in the words written on those fragile tablets. You begin to wonder whether the Sumerians wrote for the gods, or if perhaps they wrote to be heard by each other. In the end, maybe it didn't matter. The ritual of writing wasn't confined to the temples or the courts. It was as much a part of life as breathing. Love songs were meant to be shared. The act of writing was part of the ritual of connection, of showing the world who you were and what you felt, and perhaps most poignantly that you existed, if only in the echo of a song. The night deepens, and the stars outside continue their eternal dance. You're slipping now, but just before sleep overtakes you, you wonder how many of those ancient voices still echo in the corners of the world. How many love songs were written like secret letters, only to be found long after their authors have gone? Were those words ever truly lost? As you drift into a quiet slumber, you hold on to the thought that somewhere out there, someone else is writing a love song, capturing the essence of their own fleeting moment, hoping it too will be remembered, will be. The night feels endless now as the world outside falls completely silent. The soft hum of life that normally fills the air has long since faded into the depths of slumber. But inside your mind there's a constant low pulse of thought, of words, of songs, of ancient echoes that seem to stretch across time. You can't help but wonder what became of the love songs the Sumerians wrote. What stories were left untold in those unbroken lines of cuneiform? Imagine the vast archives lined with clay tablets, each one a piece of someone's heart, each one a moment of longing, of passion, of connection. Historians are still piecing together these fragments, but many have been lost to time, turned to dust by the slow erosion of the centuries. The ones we know, the ones we still read today, were often preserved by kings or priests. These were the lucky ones etched into clay by scribes in the great libraries of Ur or Nippur. They had the privilege of being stored in the archives of power, their words shielded from the ravages of time. But what of the others? The love songs of the everyday people, the ones written in the quiet corners of homes, in the soft whispers of lovers' voices. Historians still argue whether these were lost entirely or if they simply never made it into the records. Was there a class of songs, the private songs that were never meant to be seen by anyone but the person who wrote them? Or were they shared, passed from hand to hand, treasured and then forgotten? Historians still debate how common people access the medium of writing. Were they taught by the priests, or did they teach themselves in secret? Some scholars argue that writing was a rare skill confined to the elite, while others suggest that literacy in ancient Sumer was far more widespread than we often think. If the latter is true, then the love songs written by everyday Sumerians were part of a vibrant, widespread tradition. Each piece a unique reflection of its author's experience, a small but precious window into a world of personal desire and connection. You find yourself wondering what one of those love songs might have sounded like, one written by an ordinary person, perhaps a shepherd or a merchant. It wasn't just the wealthy and the powerful who felt the pull of love after all. People in all walks of life knew what it was to experience longing, to feel their hearts twist with desire for someone beyond reach. So many of their voices are lost to history, leaving behind only the faintest traces of their emotions. The humble and intimate verses full of raw honesty are the ones we'll never truly hear. Perhaps it's a strange thought, but there's something comforting in knowing that these forgotten voices still live in the clay. They may not have been written for posterity, but in their fragility, in their fleeting nature, they are more deeply connected to the human experience than any grand epic or royal decree. There's something about the quiet truth of their words that stands in stark contrast to the noise of power and politics. You turn over, pulling the blanket a little closer around your shoulders. Outside, the moon casts its pale glow over the earth, and for a moment the quiet stillness of the night mirrors the quiet that fills your mind. In that stillness, you can almost hear the voices of those ancient lovers. They didn't need grand gestures or proclamations. They simply needed words. The Sumerians understood this in a way that perhaps we've forgotten. They didn't write love songs because they wanted to immortalize their names in history. They wrote because in that moment the only thing that mattered was that feeling, the rush of desire, the aching for someone else's touch, the tenderness of a love that would never be fully understood by anyone but the two of them. The clay they wrote on may have been a practical material, but it was also symbolic, a way to capture something fleeting, something that could disappear in an instant. Love, in its purest form, is a passing moment, but when it is captured in a song, it becomes something more. It becomes a gift. You think of the love songs now, those that have survived, and wonder what they might tell us about the Sumerians themselves. Were they filled with passion, with joy, with longing? Were they the love songs of the gods or of ordinary people, the kind of love that happens when no one is looking? It doesn't matter really, because each song, whether preserved for 1,000 years or lost to time, was part of something bigger. It was part of a tradition of love and longing, a shared human experience that transcends time, place, and culture. And that's the beauty of it. Despite the centuries that separate you from those who wrote the songs, you still understand. As the night deepens, the city sleeps in its timeless rhythm. The stars remain high above, distant but ever present. In the quiet corners of the world, love still stirs, still finds its voice, still makes itself known, just as it did so long ago. The world is silent now, wrapped in a blanket of starlight and gentle winds, and you slip into that peaceful space between wakefulness and sleep. But as you drift, a thought lingers, a question about the nature of these songs. Why did they choose such a simple medium as clay? Was it just a matter of convenience, or was there a deeper significance to the way the Sumerians chose to express their most intimate thoughts and desires? Clay, as you know, is the very essence of the earth, a material shaped and molded into something beautiful and lasting. There's something symbolic in that choice, isn't there? Love, after all, is often seen as something malleable, something that takes shape depending on the circumstances, the people involved, and the time it's given. Perhaps the Sumerians recognized this. They used the earth itself, malleable and enduring, to capture feelings that were just as fleeting and vulnerable as the clay was soft. Historians often argue about the role of clay tablets in ancient Sumerian society. Some believe that the tablets were primarily functional, used to record transactions, laws, and other official matters. But then there were the poems, the songs, the records of human emotion written into the same medium. Could there be a deeper connection between the mundane and the profound in this choice? Could the very act of writing on clay signify a way to ground these ephemeral emotions, to give them weight, permanence, and importance? The love songs, especially those carved into clay, were an act of transformation. The clay, once soft, would harden with time, preserving the words for millennia. In that transformation, the emotions embedded in the tablet also underwent a shift from fleeting feelings to something tangible, something that would survive long after the lovers had faded from memory. It's easy to think of love as something too big to be captured in words, something fleeting slipping away with each passing moment. But the Sumerians, with their quiet wisdom, seemed to understand that even the most fleeting of emotions could leave an imprint, a mark that could endure. Love songs, in a sense, were their way of immortalizing that which was most human about them. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the weight of that realization settle in. The Sumerians weren't just writing love songs because they felt the need to. They were writing them because they wanted to make something last. They understood that love, though transient, is a part of the human experience that should be remembered, cherished, and honored. Historians still debate whether the Sumerians saw love as sacred. Was it simply a social construct, a necessary part of marriage and family? Or was it something that transcended even the structures of society? Something more spiritual in nature, a connection to the gods themselves. Some scholars believe that the Sumerians saw love as a divine gift, something bestowed upon them by the gods, like the harvest or the seasons. In many ways, the rituals surrounding love mirrored those surrounding the gods. Songs were sung in their honor, offerings made, and prayers spoken. Perhaps in their eyes, love wasn't just an emotion. It was a force as powerful and essential as the sun or the river, something to be revered and celebrated. Others argue that the Sumerians saw love more pragmatically as a necessity for social cohesion, for the building of families and communities. Love, in this view, wasn't a lofty divine concept. It was the glue that held society together, something that gave people a reason to connect with one another, to build a life together. But as you drift deeper into sleep, you begin to think it doesn't really matter what the Sumerians believed. The truth is, their love songs transcend those labels, those debates. They stand on their own as testaments to the human heart, the joy, the longing, the hope, and the desire that exists in every person, in every time, in every culture. In this sense, the Sumerians were no different from us. They wrote love songs not just because they had a tradition to uphold or because they felt a divine calling. They wrote them because they needed to, because love in all its forms was something worth writing down, something worth keeping. The clay tablets may have been simple, but the feelings they carried were anything but. You wonder as the night stretches on how many people have felt the same way, how many have written their hearts into words, hoping that someone somewhere would read them, understand them, and perhaps even love them in return. As you drift further into slumber, you let go of these thoughts, allowing the silence to wrap around you like a soft, familiar blanket. But deep down, you know that the love songs of the Sumerians, those fragile tablets, those quiet whispers, are still out there, waiting to be discovered, waiting to remind us that love, no matter how ancient, is timeless. The world outside is still now, the night as thick and soft as a pillow, but within your mind there's a soft murmur, a whisper that carries you further down the winding path of ancient love. The Sumerians may have been the first to carve their hearts into clay, but they weren't the only ones. As you drift deeper into slumber, your thoughts begin to stretch across time, across borders, across cultures. Was it only the Sumerians who understood the power of a love song? Did others in their own ways also find solace in the written word? In ancient Egypt, for example, lovers wrote each other poems too. These weren't just grand heroic epics sung to the gods. No, these were simple, tender songs between people. Husbands and wives, lovers who had crossed paths in the endless flow of time. Some of these love poems were found written in papyrus, while others were scratched into the walls of tombs. How strange it must have been to etch such personal words into a wall meant for the afterlife. It's as if the Egyptians, much like the Sumerians, believed that love could last beyond death. Historians still argue whether these Egyptian poems were meant as love letters or simply as expressions of longing for something lost. Some scholars believe they were written by those who could not have their love fulfilled in life, lovers separated by distance or death. Others suggest that these poems were part of the religious rituals, a kind of offering to the gods to ensure that love and devotion would continue in the afterlife. Still, the simple act of carving a love poem into a tomb speaks to something universal. It's not just the Sumerians or the Egyptians who sought to immortalize their feelings. Whether it was written in the dust of a clay tablet, the smooth surface of a papyrus scroll, or the rough stones of a tomb, love has always demanded to be remembered. You close your eyes, feeling the weight of the night pressing gently against you, and imagine the soft glow of a candle illuminating the walls of a temple or a quiet corner of a house. There, in the dim light, someone is writing. Perhaps they are writing for a lover who lives far away, or for one who has already passed into the next world. Perhaps they are writing just to express what their heart cannot contain. The Sumerians weren't the only ones who did this. Throughout history, in every corner of the world, love has found its way into written words. And then you think of the Greeks, their love stories filled with gods and mortals, filled with passion and tragedy. While they were known for their epic tales and grand mythologies, there were also the smaller, quieter poems. These were the ones written not for the gods, but for the people. Simple words, written to express the heart's deepest longings. In these poems, love is depicted as both a force of nature and a tender personal experience. There's a quiet beauty in the way the Greek poets described love not as an idealized, unattainable concept, but as something human, something that could be felt and expressed by anyone, no matter their station or their fate. These poems often speak of yearning, of separation, and of the deep joy that only love can bring. Some historians believe that these Greek love poems were an essential part of life, just as much a part of the culture as the grand epics like the Iliad or the Odyssey. They were expressions of the everyday, of the raw and unrefined parts of love that the gods themselves might never experience. It's a thought that stirs something deep inside you as you lie there, your mind racing with the quiet poetry of the past. What did love mean to these people? Was it the same as it is today, or was it something else entirely? Perhaps the Sumerians in their wisdom were simply the first to recognize that love could be eternal, even if the people who experienced it were not. The more you think about it, the more you realize that the Sumerians weren't alone in their desire to immortalize love. Every culture in its own way has sought to capture this universal experience in words. From the papyrus of Egypt to the stone tablets of the Sumerians, from the parchment scrolls of ancient Greece to the songs of the Native Americans, every culture has in some way tried to preserve the emotions of the heart. you begin to see that love songs, whether written on claystone papyrus or scroll, are not just expressions of individual affection. They are the echoes of something much larger. They are the footprints we leave behind, marking our passage through time. Each poem is a thread in the intricate tapestry of human experience, weaving a story that stretches far beyond the individuals who wrote them. The Sumerians knew this. That's why they used clay. That's why they wrote their love songs, because love in its simplest and purest form is eternal. It transcends the individual and becomes part of the collective memory of humanity. And as you drift deeper into sleep, you realize that the love songs of the Sumerians of all the ancient cultures are not just historical artifacts. They are living, breathing pieces of history that connect us all. As you relax into the quiet, the night seems even deeper now, the stars hanging above like ancient storytellers waiting to share their tales. And perhaps, in this moment, you are connected not only to the past, but to the future. Who knows what love songs will be written tomorrow? Who will take up the pen and write their hearts, hoping that their words will echo through the ages, just as those ancient Sumerians did? You feel the slow pull of sleep, a soft, warm tide washing over you, and yet you can't help but let your thoughts wander one last time. The Sumerians with their clay tablets, their cuneiform script, their love songs, they've somehow begun to feel closer to you, as though they've never really left. Their world may have crumbled long ago, but in this quiet moment their voices seem to echo through the ages, soft and insistent. The night holds them, holds you. But there's another layer to their love songs, something subtle, something often overlooked. The Sumerians didn't just write love songs for the sake of love itself. Oh no. They understood that love, like life, was also tied to duty to society and to the eternal rhythms of nature. There's a certain complexity to their emotions, that we often miss a layer of social structure that shaped the very words they wrote. While much of the surviving love poetry speaks of longing, desire, and devotion, some of the songs carry a sense of ritual, even obligation. In Sumerian culture, marriage wasn't just an individual affair. It was also a political and economic institution. Love in this sense was often intertwined with power, land, and lineage. The romantic longing expressed in the tablets may have been sincere, but it was often framed by these larger, more practical concerns. Some scholars argue that the Sumerians' love songs were a way to express the tension between personal desires and public duties. Was love simply an emotional release, a break from the constraints of daily life? Or was it part of a larger system, a way to reinforce alliances and family bonds? Perhaps the love songs themselves were a kind of delicate balance, something sweet and tender within the strictures of a world governed by necessity. Historians debate whether the love songs were ever sung aloud. The surviving records suggest that they were indeed meant to be performed, whether in private between lovers or as part of public rituals. In fact, many of the songs seem to be set in the context of religious festivals, where the gods themselves were invoked to bless the unions. Could it be that the Sumerians didn't just see love as an emotion, but as a kind of sacred duty, an offering to the gods? As you drift further into sleep, you feel the soft pulse of history beneath you like the slow beat of a heart. The Sumerians were so much like us, struggling to reconcile their desires with their roles in society. They knew that love wasn't just a private affair. It was something bigger, something that affected not just the two people involved, but the world around them. It wasn't only the gods who shaped these relationships. The land, the harvest, the fertility of the soil, these were just as important in Sumerian love songs as the sweet whispers of the heart. Many of the surviving love songs are written in parallel with nature. The blossoming of flowers, the ripening of grain, the cycles of the moon. These were not just metaphors. They were the very fabric of life in Sumer. In the same way, love was something that had to be nurtured and tended as constant and inevitable as the seasons themselves. And so in this vast landscape of Sumerian thought, love wasn't just about two individuals coming together. It was a reflection of the universe itself, a mirror of the Earth's cycles, a connection between the divine and the mortal. The love song was not just a personal expression, it was a reflection of cosmic harmony. As you lay there nestled into the quiet comfort of the night, you realize that the Sumerians may have understood love in a way that we sometimes forget. We view it as something fleeting, something that comes and goes with the wind. But for them, love was as eternal as the soil beneath their feet, as constant as the stars above. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a force that connected everything, a thread woven through the fabric of life itself. You can almost hear the music now, the soft and rhythmic tunes of an ancient time echoing in the distance, carried on the cool night air. Perhaps in the depths of sleep you'll find yourself there under the same stars, hearing those very songs as they rise up from the clay and the earth from the hearts of long-lost lovers. And then you'll know that their love songs didn't just live in the past. They've always been here, always will be woven into the very fabric of who we are. Each melody, each verse, each whisper of affection is an eternal part of the human story. You can feel the pull of sleep growing stronger, now your body softening into the comfort of the night. And yet one last thought lingers, an echo of the Sumerians' love songs, stretching across the ages, reminding you that love is not just an individual experience, but a shared one. It's something we all come back to, something that ties us together, whether we're in ancient Mesopotamia or in the here and now. The more you think about it, the clearer it becomes. Love is a language, a universal thread that links all of humanity. But here's a strange thought. Have you ever wondered what kind of stories these songs told? What were the lovers expressing in their clay-carved verses? We've already talked about the longing, the desire, and the tenderness. But beyond those familiar themes, there were more complex emotions embedded in these songs. Some were filled with sorrow, others with celebration. There were love songs that reflected the sweetness of courtship, and others that captured the pain of separation. And then there were those that seemed to walk a fine line between love and loss poems, written by lovers who knew they would never be together. Historians have spent years piecing together these fragments of the past. While the love songs of Sumer might be fragmentary, the themes they carry are timeless. One of the most enduring patterns is that of the lament love song poems, written by individuals who had either been separated from their lovers or were grieving a lost relationship. These poems often speak of yearning, of dreams unfulfilled, and the deep sorrow that comes with the absence of a loved one. Historians still argue whether these lament songs were meant to be actual expressions of grief or whether they were simply a way of exploring the darker aspects of love through art. Some scholars suggest that these songs served as catharsis, a way for the people of Sumer to work through their emotions in a structured, socially acceptable manner. Others argue that the lament was a form of ritual, an expression of the human experience that could help bring people together in their shared sorrow. In some ways, the Sumerian lament love songs are not so different from the heartbreak we experience today. They speak to something universal, something that transcends time, culture, and even language. The pain of lost love, the ache of separation, the desire for reunion. It's all there, etched into the clay, as though the very earth itself holds the sorrow of every lover who has ever lived. And yet within that sorrow, there's also a strange kind of beauty. The Sumerians understood this, didn't they? They knew that even in the darkest moments of love, there is something worth holding on to. The love song wasn't just a way to express joy. It was a way to understand the full spectrum of human emotion. Love, in all its forms, had to be felt deeply, even in its absence. As you begin to drift, you picture the Sumerian lament, the hushed voices singing under the stars. They aren't just singing about personal loss, they're singing about the human condition, the fragility of life, the fleeting nature of time, and yet the enduring power of love. The music lingers in the air like a soft breeze pulling at your heart in ways that only the deepest emotions can. Historians continue to debate whether these lament songs were exclusively private or whether they were shared in public spaces, perhaps in temple ceremonies or at community gatherings. Some believe that these love songs were meant to be experienced by a wider audience, while others think they were deeply personal, reserved for the individual's own catharsis. Regardless, they serve as a testament to the emotional depth of the Sumerians. They remind us that even in the face of heartache, love is something worth celebrating. And then as you let go of those thoughts, another question arises. If these love songs were such a deep part of Sumerian culture, how did they influence the world that came after them? What imprint did these ancient echoes leave on later civilizations, on the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, and beyond? Some scholars suggest that the Sumerians' love songs laid the groundwork for the love poetry of later cultures. After all, much of the literature that followed, whether in Greece, Rome, or the Arab world, draws heavily from the traditions of early Mesopotamian poetry. These early songs created a framework, a template for later poets to work within. And in that way, the Sumerians' love songs didn't just remain in the past. They passed through the centuries, influencing poets, musicians, and storytellers who would in turn write their own tales of love and loss. But whether their influence was direct or indirect, the impact of these songs can still be felt today. When you listen to love songs, when you read poetry about yearning and separation, you're hearing echoes of those ancient voices. The Sumerians may have been the first to capture these feelings in clay, but their songs belong to all of us, to every person who has ever loved and lost and loved again. You feel a deep sense of connection now as the night wraps itself around you. These ancient voices, these voices that have crossed thousands of years, thousands of miles, are still here, still singing, still reminding us that love in all its forms is something eternal. And with that thought, you let yourself slip fully into the peace of the night, where the Sumerian love songs echo softly, softly, until they fade into the silence of your dreams. The night wraps you in its soft embrace, the quiet murmurs of the world outside fading into nothingness as the last remnants of the Sumerian love songs drift away. Yet there's something about the Sumerians and their songs that lingers like the faintest perfume, a trace of something timeless that continues to speak to you even in the stillness of sleep. You start to wonder, how did the Sumerians craft such powerful emotional expressions in a world so different from ours? What was it about their connection to the earth, to the gods, and to each other that allowed them to speak so directly to the heart? Their relationship with the gods, for one, might have played a crucial role. You see, love in Sumer wasn't merely a human emotion. It was something that existed within the larger divine order. Love was sacred, and it was tied to the very structure of the universe. In many of their songs, Sumerians invoked deities who were intimately connected with the themes of fertility, reproduction, and the forces of nature. Goddesses like Inanna, the goddess of love and war, who was one of the most powerful figures in Sumerian mythology. Inanna's relationship with love wasn't just romantic in the way we might think of it today. It was far more complicated. She was a goddess who moved between realms, both the divine and the human, and her stories were filled with twists of passion, betrayal, and longing. Her famous descent into the underworld, for example, wasn't just about the literal journey of a goddess. It was about the cycles of life, death, and rebirth, themes that resonated deeply with the Sumerians. Inanna's myth and others like it played out in their poetry. Sumerians believed that love was something that transcended human boundaries. It was something that existed both in the natural world and in the divine. This allowed them to express their own feelings in ways that went beyond the physical. Love became a force that could connect them with the gods, and in some ways, this divine connection made their love songs even more potent. Historians still debate whether the love songs were composed solely for religious rituals, or if they were part of a broader, more personal experience. Were these songs only sung by priests and priestesses in sacred spaces, or did lovers sing them in the privacy of their homes under the cover of night? Some scholars argue that the performance of love songs was a communal activity, a shared experience that brought people together and fostered social bonds. Others suggest that they were meant for intimate moments, songs sung only between two people who understood the deeper sacred nature of love. One thing is certain: the Sumerians' connection between love and the divine was far more complex than simply worshiping a god of love. It was about aligning human emotions with the cosmic rhythms, understanding that love was both a gift and a challenge. It's this very depth of feeling that carries over into their love songs. These weren't just lighthearted tunes. They were deep, profound expressions of human yearning, written with a kind of spiritual awareness that gives them an enduring power even thousands of years later. As you settle deeper into your pillow, you realize how much of what the Sumerians wrote reflects a longing for something greater, something beyond the personal. Their love songs weren't just about individuals finding happiness. They were about connecting to the cosmos, to the divine. It was as if love itself could act as a bridge between worlds, linking humanity with the forces that governed both life and death. And then you think about how much of this you still feel today, even if you don't acknowledge it all the time. How often do we search for meaning in our own relationships, for some deeper connection that stretches beyond the here and now? It's almost as if we too are trying to find our own way back to those ancient songs, to the times when love was not just an emotion, but a force that linked us with everything around us. And perhaps in the quiet of the night, in the stillness before sleep, that connection is still there. But there's more to these ancient love songs than just the divine. Love for the Sumerians was not only about the gods, it was about the seasons, the land, and the cycles of nature. Much like Inanna's journey, love in Sumer was an ebb and flow, constantly moving between light and dark, life and death. The Sumerians' love songs often reference the changing of the seasons, the blooming of flowers, and the harvest of grain, symbols that represented fertility and renewal. Think about that for a moment. Love and nature were inseparable. The very soil they walked on, the crops they grew, and the waters they relied upon were all part of the same cosmic dance. The rhythms of nature were reflected in the rhythms of love. Just as the earth brought forth new life every spring, love, too, was reborn in its own cycles. In the quiet of the night, you can almost hear the soft rustling of the Sumerian fields, the whisper of the wind through the barley, and the low murmur of lovers' voices in the distance. They, too, were part of nature, their love intertwined with the land that fed them. It was a reminder that love, in its most natural form, is not just something that happens between people. It's something that flows through all of life, touching everything around us. Historians argue whether this connection between love and nature was truly universal in the ancient world, or whether it was unique to Sumer. Some suggest that other cultures saw love as more of an emotional experience separate from the land, while others believe that the Earth's cycles were embedded in nearly every culture's view of love. Regardless, the Sumerians captured something deeply powerful when they linked their love songs to nature's cycles. You feel the weight of that idea, the beauty of it, as you continue to drift into deeper relaxation. Love and nature intertwined, inseparable. There's something deeply calming about this connection, isn't there? It feels as though the Sumerians' songs are still with us, still woven into the very fabric of life, just waiting to be remembered again. As you settle further into slumber, you realize that this ancient connection to love, to nature, and to the divine has always been here, just beneath the surface, waiting for you to find it. And now, as you close your eyes, you can almost hear those voices from long ago, the soft echoing hum of love songs rising from the soil, the sky, and the hearts of all who have ever loved. As you drift further into the calm embrace of sleep, your mind lingers on the idea that love in ancient Sumer was an experience far more expansive than we might imagine today. The Sumerians didn't just write love songs for personal catharsis or divine connection. They wrote them to weave themselves into the fabric of the world. Love for them wasn't an isolated feeling. It was a living, breathing entity embedded in every moment of their existence. In a way, it seems as if the ancient Sumerians knew something we've forgotten, the quiet, subtle power of love to link us with everything around us. Have you ever noticed how the act of singing can evoke powerful emotions, even when you don't understand the words? There's something about melody, rhythm, and tone that taps directly into the human soul. The Sumerians understood this power well. Their songs, filled with longing, joy, sorrow, and everything in between, weren't just meant to be heard. They were meant to be felt in the deepest part of the body. As these songs were sung, the singers would sway their voices, rising and falling like the rhythm of the earth itself. Music, after all, is not merely a form of entertainment. It's a connection to something far deeper. Historians have debated whether the Sumerians' love songs were performed in a more ritualistic or celebratory setting. Were they sung at weddings, or were they used to mark the changing of the seasons, where the land and love both grew and withered in a continuous cycle? Some scholars argue that the songs were an intimate, personal expression of affection, meant for only the lovers involved. Others suggest that they were a public affair, meant to be shared with the larger community, strengthening social ties and reaffirming the interconnectedness of all people. Whatever the setting, one thing is certain: these songs were a vital part of Sumerian life, so much so that they were preserved on clay tablets for centuries. Imagine for a moment you are sitting by a fire, listening to a love song, the warmth of the flames flickering against the cool night air. The singer's voice soothes and moves you as their words rise and fall like the winds. You are no longer just hearing a song, you are part of it, a thread woven into a much larger tapestry. Historians still debate the exact function of these love songs. Were they simply entertainment, or did they serve a more profound purpose? Some suggest that they were a form of therapy, a way for individuals to process their deepest emotions in a safe and structured way. Others propose that the songs were a means of maintaining social cohesion, allowing people to bond over shared themes of love loss and longing. There's something striking about this idea of love songs as both personal and communal. It reminds you that even in ancient times, love was never just an isolated experience. It was always about connection, about feeling something larger than yourself. The Sumerians, in their infinite wisdom, knew that love had the power to bridge not only the gap between people, but also between the living and the divine, the human and the natural. You can almost picture it, these ancient songs carried on the wind, crossing vast distances, their words lasting through the centuries. Even though the Sumerians are long gone, their love songs continue to reverberate, their echoes caught in the rhythms of the earth. Every time you hear a love song today, you're hearing something ancient, something that connects you to the heart of humanity itself. And yet there's something more, something quiet, almost imperceptible. The idea that the Sumerians didn't simply sing of their love, they sang it into being. Their love songs weren't just reflections of emotions, they were the very creation of love itself. In this way, the Sumerians understood the true power of art. It has the ability to shape the world around you. When they sang of love, they weren't just recounting experiences. They were invoking them, creating them in real time, as though the very act of singing could call forth the divine. Historians have often noted the lack of personal pronouns in many of these songs. It's as if the singers weren't simply talking about themselves and their feelings. They were tapping into something much larger, the collective experience of all lovers. By removing the singular I or you, the songs become universal, a shared experience for everyone who has ever known love. This raises an interesting question. How did the Sumerians see themselves in relation to the cosmos? Were they simply individuals, or did they see themselves as part of a larger, interconnected web of love that spanned the universe? Some scholars argue that they saw themselves not as individuals, but as mere vessels of a larger force, something greater than themselves. In this way, their love songs weren't just expressions of human emotion. They were acts of worship, of becoming one with the eternal forces that govern the world. As you sink deeper into sleep, you begin to understand that this was not just about romantic love. The Sumerians in their songs explored all facets of love, love for family, for the land, for the gods, and for the self. And in that way, their songs were far more than simple expressions of affection. They were about becoming whole, about connecting with the universe on a deeper level. In the distance, you can hear the faintest murmur, a whisper of an ancient song carried on the wind. It's the Sumerian love song, still echoing through time, still resonating in the hearts of all who have ever loved. And as you let this thought carry you into deeper relaxation, you understand that love in its many forms is an eternal thread that ties all of us together. The night continues to unfold around you as your thoughts wander deeper into the Sumerian world. You've already begun to sense the depth of connection they felt between their love songs and the divine. But there's one more element to explore: the way these songs linked not just the lovers themselves, but entire communities together. The Sumerians, despite their rich mythology, and complex relationship with the gods had an incredibly practical understanding of love. They knew that love wasn't just for the intimate, private moments between two people. No, love was for everyone, and it played a vital role in the well-being of the entire community. As you rest, let's consider the role of the Sumerian temples. These sacred spaces were often the center of both religious and social life. The temples of Inanna, the goddess of love, fertility, and war, were some of the grandest in Sumer. They weren't just places of worship. They were vibrant hubs of activity, full of music, poetry, and communal rituals. Inanna's temple wasn't a quiet, solemn place. It was a place of song, where the air vibrated with the sounds of love being sung into existence. Could it be that the Sumerians understood that love at its core was meant to be shared, and that by singing together they were strengthening not only their personal relationships, but also the social fabric of their communities? Historians argue whether the public performances of these love songs were ritualistic in nature or whether they were simply forms of entertainment. The Sumerians were known for their elaborate feasts and festivals, and it's likely that love songs were performed during these occasions, helping to unite people in shared experiences of joy and passion. Imagine for a moment a grand feast in the Temple of Inanna, with people from all walks of life gathered to celebrate the bonds of love and fertility. There, amidst the clinking of cups and the laughter of friends, love songs would fill the air, not just as a backdrop, but as the heartbeat of the entire event. In this sense, love wasn't something to be kept behind closed doors. It was something to be celebrated in the open, woven into the very fabric of the community. This communal aspect of love songs was likely crucial for maintaining the societal order of ancient Sumer. The city-states of Sumer were built on intricate social hierarchies, with clear distinctions between the elite and the common people. But in the sacred space of the temple, during the shared experience of singing love songs, those distinctions would blur. For a few moments, everyone, regardless of status, could experience the same feeling of connection, both to one another and to the gods. It's also important to note that the themes of the love songs were not always about the pure, idealized notion of romantic love. Often, the lyrics would touch upon themes of longing, separation, and unrequited love, feelings that were all too familiar in the human experience. It was in these moments of vulnerability, of expressing pain and desire, that the Sumerians were able to find common ground with one another. Love songs weren't always about the easy parts of life. Sometimes they explored the complexities of human emotions, the longing for something that felt just out of reach, or the sorrow of love lost. In this way, the Sumerians understood the healing power of shared vulnerability, a power that transcended both time and space. Historians still debate the extent to which Sumerians viewed these songs as purely sacred acts. Were they purely meant for religious rituals, as offerings to the gods, or did they serve a more social purpose, strengthening relationships and building community? Some argue that the presence of songs in the temples of Inanna suggests that they were seen as direct forms of communication with the divine, while others suggest that they were intended to bind the community together by offering a shared experience of love and devotion. Either way, these songs were central to the life of the Sumerians, weaving a thread of unity through their hearts, their families, and their society. You imagine what it must have been like to be a part of that world, where every song, every note carried the weight of a deeper collective meaning. It was as if in their love songs, the Sumerians managed to speak directly to the heart of humanity. These songs weren't just a way to express affection for a partner. They were a way to express something universal, something that could resonate with every person who heard them, regardless of their station in life. Perhaps, in some ways, the power of these songs is still present today. After all, love songs are still a central part of human culture, from the simplest melodies to the grandest orchestral arrangements. They continue to connect us to one another, to remind us of our shared humanity, and to offer us comfort in times of loneliness or longing. The Sumerians, it seems, knew something profound, that love in its many forms is the thread that binds us all together, no matter how far we've come or how much time has passed. As you slip further into slumber, you feel the warmth of those ancient communal bonds woven together in song. You can almost hear the gentle melodies rising from the long-lost temples, the soft echo of love that continues to resonate through the ages. It's a reminder that even in the most distant corners of history, the power of love was always there. Quiet, enduring, and ever-present, waiting to bring people together in ways both simple and profound. As you continue to drift deeper into your restful state, your mind begins to settle on the deeper layers of Sumerian society, the way their understanding of love stretched far beyond personal relationships and wove itself into their daily rituals. Imagine yourself then, walking the bustling streets of ancient Sumer, the air thick with the scent of incense barley and the murmur of everyday life. The people around you are not simply going about their day. They are in their very existence, participating in something much larger than themselves. In every action, there is a sense of connection to their gods, their community, and yes, even to their love songs. Sumerian life was in many ways a constant series of rituals. They had gods for everything: fertility, war, wisdom, and even love. The divine was embedded in the everyday, and love was no exception. The Sumerians didn't just sing love songs during festivals or in the privacy of their homes. They also invoked the power of love in their religious ceremonies. One of the most striking examples of this connection between love and spirituality is the annual sacred marriage ritual. This was a public event steeped in symbolism and intimacy, where the king would symbolically marry the goddess Inanna. It was believed that through this ritual, the fertility of the land would be ensured for the coming year, as the king's union with the goddess represented the balance of divine and earthly forces. Historians often wonder whether these sacred unions were seen as purely symbolic, or if the people genuinely believed that love could affect the harvest, the weather, and the overall prosperity of the land. Some scholars argue that this ritual, with its deep ties to agricultural cycles, was not just about the gods. It was about reinforcing the idea that love, in all its forms, had the power to shape the very world around them. Love wasn't simply a private affair. It was something that could manifest in tangible, real-world changes. The Sumerians, it seems, had an almost mystical understanding of love, seeing it as a force that transcended the human experience. In a sense, love wasn't just felt, it was invoked. It was an active, creative force capable of bringing about change, whether that change was seen in the growth of crops, the success of a city, or the connection between individuals. To love for the Sumerians was to participate in a divine act. And when they sang their love songs, they were engaging in something far greater than personal expression. They were invoking the very forces of life and death, creation and destruction, and everything in between. Historians continue to debate the exact nature of these rituals. Some argue that the sacred marriage was primarily a political tool used to legitimize the ruler's power and tie him directly to the gods. Others suggest that it was a deeply spiritual event meant to remind the people of the importance of love and fertility in the cycles of life. Whatever the case may be, it is clear that love, in its many forms, was viewed by the Sumerians as something sacred, something that connected them not just to one another, but to the divine forces that shaped their world. As your body relaxes further, you start to picture the imagery of these ancient rituals, the king dressed in royal robes, standing before the grand temple of Inanna. Around him, priests and priestesses sing songs of love and fertility, their voices rising in unison, echoing through the sacred halls. The air is thick with the scent of burning incense, and the rhythmic beating of drums reverberates through your very chest. It's a scene of immense grandeur, yet also of simplicity. Love in this moment is the central force that binds the human and divine together. But beyond the grandeur of the ritual, what is perhaps most striking is the intimacy of the act. This wasn't just a performance. It was a deeply personal experience for the king and the goddess, a moment of union that was believed to affect the entire community. The Sumerians understood that love at its core is an act of vulnerability. To open yourself to another, to give and receive affection, is to create something new in the world, something that wasn't there before, but which in its creation brings life. As you breathe deeper, the rhythm of the drums seems to carry you into a space of stillness. The love songs of the Sumerians, though ancient, still seem to resonate like echoes of a world where love wasn't something to be hidden, but something to be celebrated. Perhaps the true message of their songs isn't just about romance, but about the power of love to create, to nurture, and to transform the world. Historians still question how much the Sumerians actually believed in the power of these love rituals to influence the land and the seasons. Some suggest that they were simply following tradition, unaware of the symbolic importance they attached to these events. Others believe that the Sumerians understood something far deeper, that love in its purest form is a force of nature, one that operates on both the spiritual and physical realms. It's a concept that feels almost impossible to grasp from our modern perspective. But in the ancient world, love was a force that could not be ignored. As you let these thoughts settle, it becomes clear the Sumerians didn't just sing love songs because they were romantic or nostalgic. They did it because they understood that love, like the earth itself, was a force that needed to be cultivated, nurtured, and celebrated. Through song, through ritual, and through their daily lives, they actively participated in the creation of love, a force that was, and still is, capable of changing everything. As your breath slows and the rhythm of the night cradles you deeper into relaxation, there's a shift in the atmosphere. It's as though we've now moved beyond the temples and grand rituals of the Sumerians, and we find ourselves contemplating the quieter, more personal ways in which love was woven into their lives. The songs, of course, were grand and ceremonial, but what about the everyday Sumerian? The one who labored in the fields, tended to her family, or traded in the marketplace. How did they experience love through the lens of their cultural practices? And how did these humble moments contribute to the lasting legacy of Sumerian love songs? Let's take a step back and imagine the rhythm of daily life in ancient Sumer. You might be picturing yourself as a Sumerian, walking home after a long day of work. The sounds of the marketplace fade behind you, the chatter of vendors and customers replaced by the soft hum of your thoughts. As the sun begins to set over the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates, you feel a shift in your heart, a longing to connect, to reach out, to express the quiet affection you've been holding inside all day. There's no grand ritual, no performance, just a simple, intimate moment between you and the one you love. Perhaps this is where the true beauty of Sumerian love songs lies. They weren't just for the divine or for grand public ceremonies, they were also for these simple, quiet moments. Historians have uncovered evidence that the Sumerians would often write love poetry on small clay tablets which they would exchange with loved ones, much like modern-day love letters. These private poems weren't performed in public, they were personal tokens filled with longing, desire, and affection. They were a way for the Sumerians to communicate their feelings across time and space, a form of connection that transcended the limitations of spoken words. How wondrous it must have been to hold one of those clay tablets in your hands, a tangible piece of someone's heart, carefully inscribed with words of love. Imagine now a young woman sitting alone in her home, the cool evening air drifting in through an open window. She takes a small tablet and with a reed stylus in hand, she begins to write. Her thoughts flow into the inscribed lines, her love for someone, perhaps a distant lover or a beloved spouse, pouring out onto the clay. She's not performing for an audience. She's simply speaking from the heart. Each word she writes carries with it a piece of her soul, preserved for all eternity. The tablet, once completed, is placed in a safe corner, waiting to be read by the person she loves. It's not about the grandeur of the gesture, it's about the intimacy of it, the quiet act of devotion that takes place in the privacy of one's home. Historians still debate the extent to which these personal love poems were a part of everyday Sumerian life. Were they reserved for the elite? Or were they something that everyone from the most powerful ruler to the humblest farmer could take part in? Some suggest that these poems were mostly a privilege of the wealthier classes, as they were the ones who had access to writing materials and education. Others argue that love songs and poetry were not as elitist as we might think. Perhaps even the most humble Sumerians had the opportunity to compose their own love songs, songs that were not about the gods or the king, but about the simple, beautiful emotions shared between two people. The fact that Sumerians took the time to inscribe their love poems on durable clay tablets is a testament to how deeply they valued love and affection. These weren't fleeting gestures or casual exchanges, they were lasting commitments meant to endure. A clay tablet might survive for millennia, just as the love it recorded would live on in the hearts of those who read it. In this way, love songs were immortalized, kept alive in the very material of their creation. What a comforting thought, isn't it? That love, no matter how humble or quiet, can endure through time and space, carved into the very fabric of history. Now, as you lay in the stillness of the night, consider how this practice of recording love, of creating a tangible representation of affection, may have brought a sense of permanence to relationships. The fleeting moments of desire and connection were given a lasting home on the smooth surface of a clay tablet. What began as a temporary feeling, a momentary emotion, was transformed into something eternal. Something that could be read, touched, and cherished long after it was first written. It's a powerful thought, isn't it? That love, even in its simplest, quietest forms, has the ability to transcend time. Historians still argue whether these personal love songs were intended to be read aloud or kept for private contemplation. Some suggest that the poems were written with the intention of being shared with a lover, while others believe they were written purely as a form of self-expression, meant to be read only by the one who wrote them. Either way, the act of writing and preserving love in this way was a deeply intimate process, a way for the Sumerians to connect not just with one another, but with the very fabric of their own hearts. As you drift further into sleep, think about these quiet, intimate moments, the love songs written in the privacy of someone's home, the love preserved in clay. It's a reminder that love in its purest form doesn't always need to be grand or public. Sometimes the most powerful expressions of love are the ones that are kept close to the heart, quietly enduring through time, like the clay tablets of ancient Sumer. As the soothing hum of ancient Sumer's love songs continues to drift through your mind, imagine the sensation of your body becoming lighter and lighter. You are moving through time, through the soft layers of history, where the melodies of love seem to echo faintly. The Sumerians, whose lives were filled with ritual, religion, and connection, also believed that love could shape the destiny of their civilization in profound and powerful ways. In fact, their songs were not just about affection between individuals. They were also about love for the world itself, love for the very idea of creation and existence. It's fascinating to think about how these songs served not only as expressions of human emotion, but as conduits for something much greater, the connection between humanity and the cosmos. Many of the love songs were dedicated to the gods, invoking divine intervention, or even appealing to cosmic forces for protection, prosperity, or fertility. As you ease deeper into relaxation, consider how love in Sumerian thought was deeply entwined with the cycles of life itself. Whether it was the love between a man and a woman, the reverence of a king for his goddess, or the people's longing for a bountiful harvest, love was seen as an eternal force that both sustained and challenged life. The Sumerians, in their wisdom, understood that love had the power to heal, to create, and to destroy. The love songs they composed were more than just personal odes. They were instruments of change. They were believed to have the power to invoke blessings from the gods, making them not only romantic, but deeply spiritual. Historians still debate the extent to which these love songs were meant to appease the gods. But one thing is certain: the Sumerians viewed love as a dynamic, all-encompassing force, capable of shaping both their personal lives and the future of their civilization. Every song written, every poem carved into clay, had the potential to alter the course of their lives, whether through a successful harvest, a military victory, or even the simple joy of human connection. And, as you lay there, feeling your body surrender to the weight of the night, consider that just like the Sumerians, we continue to look to love for guidance. We create, we sing, and we express our feelings often in the hope that love will connect us with something larger than ourselves. Whether it's the intimacy shared between two people or the collective longing for peace and happiness, love remains a universal language. Perhaps the true message of Sumerian love songs is that love is both an individual and communal experience. It binds us to each other, to our environment, and to the greater forces of the universe. Now, as the world around you fades into peaceful silence, take one last moment to think about the legacy of these ancient love songs. Imagine them carved in clay and sent to someone special, or recited by priests in sacred temples. They were not just words, but carriers of emotion, history, and hope, timeless tokens of the most human part of us, the desire to love and be loved in return. This is the true gift of Sumerian love songs, their ability to bridge the gap between past and present, between the divine and the human, and between the ephemeral and the eternal. As your mind floats gently through these ancient thoughts, know that the love songs of the Sumerians and the emotions they carried will continue to live on in the quiet corners of history. And in some way, they are with you, still whispering across the centuries, reminding you of the power of love to shape not just lives, but worlds. Now, as you drift into a deeper slumber, let the soothing thoughts of these ancient melodies wash over you. Feel the peace that comes with understanding that, like those long-forgotten love songs carved into clay love, will continue to echo through time forever.